Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to get started with tonight's Find Your Fit program. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm Mary Pat O'Neill, and I'm the founder of the Find Your Fit program through the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I appreciate everybody who donated for tonight's session. 100% of the money goes toward the foundation's wonderful programs. And if you're not familiar with them, check out their website because they do a lot of really good work. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how to create a balanced college list. Oh, heavens. Let's see here. As always, technical problems. Okay. So, why isn't this working tonight? I practice. There we go. Okay. So just some information for tonight. So tonight's webinar is being recorded. The recording and resources will be sent out by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation to everyone who registered. This is typically sent out within a week of the webinar, sometimes sooner. I am not sending out my PowerPoint. At the end of the session today, I'm going to do a quick demonstration. And then after that, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. And that part will not be recorded. And the purpose for tonight is what I'm hoping is that whether you're a parent or you're a student, that I've given you tools so that you're able to create a college list. That's one of the reasons why I volunteer my time with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. It's my way of giving back to the community. I am a first generation myself. My parents didn't go to college, and it bothers me to see sometimes the advantages that families have over families who don't have the information. And so I'm trying to level the playing field. And when we're talking about college lists or anything to do with college, I say this all the time, but please keep in mind that colleges all do things differently. So a lot of times when I'm asked a question, I have to say, well, it's going to depend on the college. And the other point is just to remember that this is not a one size fit all process. Everyone is different. Hallelujah, best part of my job, that we're not all the same. So what's right for one person may not be right for another person. If you have more than one child in your family, you might find that the process is very different because we are all different. So as I said, my goal is to help provide the tools and give you some research and thought process behind how to create a college list. And I just wanted to go through and explain, like, I don't know what grades people are in here. If you're a freshman, it's fine to listen to this. There really isn't much, I don't think, that a freshman can be doing as far as creating a college list. I think it's too soon. Sophomore year, sure, you can start thinking about it. Um, Junior year, I would say this is the premier year. If you're a junior, this is a great time. One of the things you may not know, but most college applications are submitted in November of senior year. So it's not that far off. It's only like 9 months away, which goes by very quickly. If you're a senior, or if you wait till senior year, let's say fall of senior year, you can certainly create a college list. Just know that your process is going to be a lot quicker and compressed because of the deadlines that I was talking about. So in a perfect world, I think junior year is a great time to work on a college list. So, um, so the first thing I always want to make sure that families understand is the three different types of colleges that we have in the United States, because the type of college dramatically impacts both the admissibility of a student and the cost. So here's a term that I'll explain, give some examples in a little bit, but oftentimes families don't take into account the term institutional priorities. And these are things that are 100% out of the control of anybody, because these are the specific goals and needs that a college has to fulfill its admissions process. And I'll give some examples of those in a few minutes. Okay, so the three types of colleges. The first one is the in-state public. We are here in Washington State, and we have 6 four-year public universities: the University of Washington, Washington State, Western University, Eastern University, Central University, and Evergreen State College. Because we are residents in the state of Washington, any Washington resident who applies to these 6 schools gets priority admission at our schools. They prioritize it. So that's one of those institutional priorities that I mentioned earlier. So at UW last year, Seattle campus, I think something like 71% of admitted students were Washington State residents. Another area where that institutional priority comes into play is in some of the direct admit programs like computer science at the University of Washington in the Seattle campus. About 25% of Washington State residents are admitted to the program that apply. But for non-residents, which means they don't live in the state of Washington, or if they're international students, the acceptance rate is 2%. Again, UW prioritizes its residents. So then we have, the second thing is with the in-state public is the fact that we pay property taxes in Washington State, and our property taxes fund education. So because of all the property taxes that we pay, they deeply discount the tuition at our 6 schools. So the University of Washington and Washington State are the most expensive at about $12,000 a year for tuition. The other ones like Western and Central are less expensive. And while those numbers aren't cheap compared to the other numbers that I'll be sharing with you, they are. They're relatively speaking, and that is why so many families are interested in their children attending in-state public universities. So the second category of schools is what's known as the out-of-state public. And I have to speak very generically here because I'm talking about 49 states. But first of all, a student in Washington is not a resident in these other states, so they lose the priority admission. The second thing is because they haven't paid property taxes in that state, they've lost the tuition discount that is offered for residents. So generally speaking, out-of-state non-resident tuition is 3 times in-state tuition. There are some states where it's fairly easy for out-of-state students to be admitted, and then there are other states like California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, where it can be more difficult. Some of these out-of-state public universities will offer scholarship money to non-residents. Other ones will say, sorry, we keep all of our money for our residents. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. And then the final category, can't really see over my head here, but it's the private university. In private universities, that simply means that they're not funded through property taxes. So they don't really take into account so much where a student lives. And sometimes families will say, oh, they're too expensive. They're generally speaking not any more expensive than out-of-state publics, but again, sometimes they can be very, very generous with scholarship money. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But those are the 3 different types of colleges in the United States. So I have a slide here with 4 states on it: North Carolina, California, Texas, and Florida. And I think I should have added Georgia too. So I mentioned the term institutional priorities. So like in North Carolina, a very popular public university there is UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think I've ever had a student admitted to Chapel Hill. I'm not saying I have like hundreds of them apply each year, but I don't think I've ever had a student be admitted there. And it's partly because it was hard to get into, but secondly, they have, by state law, 82% of the students at UNC Chapel Hill must be North Carolina residents. And if they're not, the school gets fined. And last year, I think they were fined because they were taking too many out-of-state students. Texas is another one, very protective of their residents and their state schools. A popular school that many students want to apply to is UT Austin, University of Texas Austin. And I have to tell these students, just like I do with Chapel Hill and some of the other schools, that these are extreme reaches. And it's not because the students aren't qualified, it has to do with these institutional priorities. So for UT Austin, by law, okay, they have law. So 75% of the admitted students to UT Austin come from a guaranteed admission process through their high schools in the state, that the top 6% of students at each high school is guaranteed admission. So that takes up a lot of spots. And then another state law says that only a maximum of 10% of admitted students can come from outside of the state of Texas, which includes the 49 states plus international students. And so that's why it's just so difficult for students to get admitted. University of California system is similar. They have 9 campuses for undergraduate, and some are easier to get in than others, but students always think about, oh, UCLA, Berkeley, Santa Barbara. And again, they are restricted that the total out-of-state non-resident population on a campus for all 4 years, taking all 4 years combined, can not be greater than 18%. So just keep in mind that there are rules like that, and it restricts things. So I also tell students before they start working on their college list, there's some data points that they should know. One is their high school cumulative GPA or grade point average. What will be used for applying to college will be through the end of junior year. Whether or not they've taken any rigor classes, and rigor classes would be honors classes, advanced placement classes, maybe UW in the classroom classes, but have they taken any? Standardized test scores, again, it depends where you're applying. Some schools require them now. Some schools, or many schools, I should say, are still test optional or don't use them. And while no one is defined by a number, the data is important in this process, okay? So when I go to create a college list, I go to a website, okay? And here's a whole bunch of different websites that families can use to create a college list. The one I probably use the most is College Board. But that's, I always joke it's because I'm an old lady and I'm just comfortable with it. But it doesn't matter. You can use any college search site that you want. And what happens when you go into a college search site, there are filters that they're going to ask for you to fill out, like what are you looking for? And so this is where kind of thinking about it a little bit, what is it that you want? And so we'll go through some of these, but acceptance rate we'll talk about. I typically will say I want both public and private universities. There's different sizes. There's small, medium, and large. Small universities are 2,000 students or less. Medium tends to be between 2 and 15,000. Anything over 15,000 is considered large. Geographic location. I'm always surprised by how often kids don't think about this. They're like, I don't know. Well, how far from home do you want to be? Do you have family elsewhere? Um, how hard is it going to be for you to get to the airport? What kind of weather do you like? You can see all these different things. Uh, if you say, I want to study biology anywhere in the United States, you are going to, and using these search engines, you're going to have a very big list. So really think about it. Like, where have you been? Do you have family? What sounds good to you? There's different settings. There's an urban setting, a suburban setting, rural setting. Some of these settings can be college towns, like University of Oregon is in Eugene, which is a fairly big city, but it's definitely a college town. University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan is a pretty big city, almost part of Detroit now, but it is certainly a college town. Pullman, where Washington State is a very cute college town, but it's more rural. And again, I kind of encourage people to have more of an open mind at the beginning, because I can tell you from my own personal experience with my 2 children who are now adults, that at the beginning of their processes, they both had different ideas, and then just through keeping an open mind, were surprised at what they liked and how different things were than what they imagined in their head. An important one is whether or not it's a commuter or residential campus. So a commuter campus is one where the majority of the students do not live on campus. They live locally and they commute. And there's nothing wrong with that, except it will be a different social scene. Because students aren't there in the evenings, they're probably not going to be there on the weekend. And if you are living in a dorm, because there's dorms on commuter campuses, it just might be a different vibe. And it's just something to think about. And then a residential campus is one where the majority of students are living on campus and they typically have dorms and things like that. Again, college majors. We'll talk more about college majors. But if you think you might want to be a nurse and they don't offer nursing, it's probably not a good fit for you. So some students are, they want sports, they want to be in orchestra, they want to be part of Greek life, or they might not want Greek life. Support programs. I work with a lot of students who may have an IEP in high school. They might need some accommodations. You can check for that. This one, the liberal or conservative, it's not really one that there's a filter, but you can get a sense about a campus if it's liberal or conservative. Again, weather, and then travel. And travel is not a filter, but one of the things as you start working on your college list, pay attention to how easy or difficult it can be to get home. Okay. Is it a 2-hour Uber ride to get to the airport? Are there shuttles? Is it, there's different things like that. So these are just things just to start thinking about. And one of the things that I encourage students to do and families to do is keeping an open mind. You may hear the term liberal arts college, and for some reason, a lot of people close their minds to that. So liberal arts college is also known as a liberal arts and sciences, just people shorten the term. And this includes universities with a religious affiliation. When I talked about my kids going through their process, and they both said at the beginning, and they went to different universities, they said, I am not going to XYZ school. My daughter didn't want to go to a liberal arts, a religious-based liberal arts college because she thought they would teach her creationism. My son didn't want to because that's what his sister did. And they both were surprised at what they found out when they visited these colleges. So I think sometimes people hear the term liberal arts and students or parents think, well, I want to study STEM. Well, trust me, you can study computer science, engineering, physics, whatever the STEM field is at a liberal arts college, just like at a large university, you could study the humanities. They offer both. The biggest difference is in a liberal arts college, the classroom size is a lot smaller and the emphasis is more on undergraduate education. At a big public research university, it's in the graduate schools. That's their emphasis. Anyways, so I just always say, just keep an open mind. You can put it on your list. You can check it out. Putting a college on your list does not commit anyone to attending it, but you might be surprised at what you find, especially like for students who maybe are thinking about going to graduate school, whether it be law school or medical school. There can be a lot more support and opportunities at the smaller universities than perhaps at the public universities with their graduate students and having to be super aggressive. So just keep an open mind. That will be my message tonight. Anyways, but again, some of the advantages are it's a well-rounded education. The professor-student ratio is so much better. A lot of kids care about social justice, and the liberal arts campuses tend to be very strong in that. The communication skills, there's more flexibility, great leadership opportunities. You have access to those professors. You can read the slide, but please keep an open mind with it. I find that often families don't understand what the liberal arts and sciences colleges, universities are, and they can be amazing opportunities. So one of the things I want to caution about is the focusing only on the acceptance rate of a school when doing the filters. Every year through my work with the foundation in the spring, April, May, I will hear from parents who I've not worked with their children, but they have only applied to the most highly selective schools. And their children, who are very smart, very bright, have no options available. They did not get into any of the schools. And that is one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why I believe in the importance of having a balanced college list. So keep, broaden your search here. So there are about 2,100 four-year public and private colleges in the United States, or universities. I use the term interchangeably. Just so you know, the only difference between a college and a university is a college does not have a graduate school, whereas a university will have graduate, whether it be like a UW with all their graduate programs, or a Seattle U that has a law school and a master's program, and things like that. So going back to the data, when I search from the 2,100 schools for the colleges that accept 10% or less of the applicants, it's 35 schools. Okay, 35. And then if I go between 10% and 25%, that's 66 schools. So that's a total of 101 colleges, which ignores more than 2,000 colleges, many of which are awesome and amazing. Okay, so just broaden your outlook. So you may have heard the term highly selective college. A highly selective college simply means that there are too many qualified applicants applying for too few spots. And one of the problems about where we live here in Seattle is the fact that we have all these technology companies with very smart employees. And those very smart employees tend to have very smart children. So it is not uncommon for a student to have a 4.0 or close to it, 3.9 or higher. They might have a 99th percentile standardized test score. They might have taken a wide variety of AP classes or honors classes, whatever. And I see these kids and they're thinking that they're going to get into these highly selective schools. And I'm not saying they won't. However, again, I work with data. It's highly unlikely that they will. And this chart, which is from fall 24 admissions, just I think it's important to take a look at. So if you look at MIT, which has a 4% acceptance rate, and I think it's really hard for people to conceptualize, what does 4% even mean? So you can see that last year they had 33,000 applications and 32,000 of them were rejected. If you look at Columbia, 55,000 applied and 53,000 were rejected. And you can look through all these different numbers. And admissions people say all the time, yeah, about 85% of the students who apply are more than qualified. We simply don't have enough spots. So I'm not against, if somebody has a dream school, they watch Gilmore Girls and they want to go to Yale, which I've heard before. That's great. Put Yale on your list, but make sure you balance it so that at the end of the day, you have choices and that they're choices that you're excited about, because it is not a lottery. This is a chart. I'll put it in my resources. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but what this is, this shows for a handful of highly selective schools what the acceptance rate was in fall of 24 and the number of applications that they had for the freshman class. And then you see the same numbers for 2014, so 10 years ago, and then back in 1994, so 30 years ago. And so you can see, going back to Yale, and 30 years ago, it had a 17% acceptance rate and had 13,000 applications. Last year, had a 4.35% acceptance rate and received over 52,000 applications. And the reason I bring this up is sometimes in my work, I will have parents who say things like, well, I got into whatever school, you should be able to. And it's not, it's very different. Or even worse, I didn't get into Yale in 1994, so I need you, child, to pull up the family honor and bring this in. So, uh, which is a lot of pressure to put on the child. And again, it's such a different environment. So just keep in mind that things have gotten very selective. And then what this is, they take a survey of colleges and they get a state of college admissions. And this is from 2024. And they talk about in colleges, just, say what is of considerable importance, moderate importance, limited importance, and no importance to them in the admissions process. Now, this is a collective, it's a survey, but you can see the top three things are high school grades in the college prep classes. So that's your core classes, total grades, the strength of the high school curriculum. But number four is positive character attributes. And then way down at the bottom right now is the standardized test scores. Whereas, 6 years ago, standardized test scores probably would have been number four. But I just want you to keep these type of things in perspective, because remember those data points that I talked about, so have an idea of like, okay, well, how am I lining up with all this? And you can also find the same information individually by college. And there's a great website. It'll be one of the resources that I send out afterwards, where they show 20 different admission factors. And you can see, again, what's very important, considered, and not considered. So I did this for Carnegie Mellon. The website's called College Data. You can find this any college under their admissions tab. You just have to scroll through. So you can see at Carnegie Mellon, which is a highly selective school, rigor, GPA, class rank, which in Lake Washington, we don't have that. So on college applications, we say not applicable because we don't have it, and colleges don't expect people to create things that we don't have because that's out of our control. Extracurricular activities, volunteer work, character, personal qualities, those are all very important. And then you have letters of rec and essays and talent and are you the first gen, so you can see that. And then here's UW Seattle. Theirs looks different. What is very important to them is rigor, GPA, and essay. All right. And then other things. So just know this information is available to you. I wouldn't pull this up for every college when I initially create a college list, but as I start narrowing it down, I certainly would use this information. So once used a search tool and you've put in your items, and as I said earlier, I'm going to do a quick example at the end, and I realize I'm going to make it look effortless because I've been doing this for a long time. So for me, it's like probably like some of you with programming. I could not do it that quickly, but I can create a college list. Anyways, have a spreadsheet, you use some sort of a spreadsheet, and you might have the name of college, location, the type, is it in-state, out-of-state, private, the size. You might want to, again, I don't know if I'd put in the application requirements yet. I'd probably wait until I was narrowing down my list. The FISC Guide, which is a wonderful resource that you can buy on Amazon for about 20 bucks. It's the top 300 schools in the US, and there's great information in there. So when you have your colleges, what you should go through and do is color code them, okay? And there's a lot of different terminology out there. This is what I use. I use match, maybe, reach, and extreme reach, okay? And match just simply, I color code them green. That's what I do. You can do anything you like. But this just means, wow, when I look at a student's GPA, test scores, if they're considered, again, especially in the West, test scores are not, standardized test scores are not used. UW doesn't use them, the UC, I think the only school in the West that is using standardized test scores is Stanford. So anyways, I look at, has the student taken some more challenging classes, things like that. And if I think based on all that information, and they're going to have to, if it's an out-of-state public, I have to pay attention to how many out-of-state students is this, is it one of those, is this a UT Austin or something? Oh, that might change it. But anyways, if I think that they're likely to be admitted, I color coded green it, and it's a match. Now, sometimes people will use the terminology with me and say, oh, Mary Pat, these are my safety schools. Okay. personally, when I create a college list, I do not put safety schools on anybody's list because I don't like safety schools. A safety school, by my definition, is a school that admits everybody and nobody ever graduates. Well, who wants to go there? Okay. And we're going to talk about green schools are beautiful because of some of the things that they offer students, which we'll talk about. But again, in my world, my match schools are not safety schools. Maybe you're putting safety schools on there, but I don't. And keep in mind, 80% of colleges in the US accept at least 50% of the students who apply. And this includes UW because they prioritize Washington state residents. Um, and no one should ever call UW Seattle a safety school because it's not. Anyways, a blue school in my world is a maybe. You might say, well, so it's a school that accepts 50% of the students. Now, again, there's a little wiggle room there. And again, I do this all the time. But if it accepts 50% of the students, or it's an out-of-state public, I don't know, maybe it has a 60% acceptance rate, but it only accepts 20% of the students. Like I kind of have to factor that all in. But I generally know if a student's strong enough. And I'll just say maybe. And I do tend to be very conservative with my color coding because I would rather a student be very excited and say, "Ha, Mary Pat, you said it was a maybe, you said it was a reach." And kids get in these reaches and extreme reaches. I don't want you to think they don't. It's just more to have it balanced, okay? An orange school is a reach, which means the acceptance rate falls between 10 and 25%. And any college that accepts less than 10% is an extreme reach. And I don't care who the student is. Okay. And I have worked with some amazing kids that I call rock stars, and they get the same speech from me because, you got to keep all of this in perspective. So, so here's just some examples for you. So let's assume we have a 4.0 student, done tons of rigor classes. And let's say they've taken, I don't know, 8 AP classes or whatever. They have a 1550 on their SAT, which is 99th percentile, and they want to study computer science. Sounds like a lot of kids around here. Anyways, so the University of Michigan, which is a public out-of-state school, has an 18% acceptance rate. University of Illinois Urbana has a 44% acceptance rate. Stanford has a 4% acceptance rate. UT Austin has a 29% acceptance rate. And then USC, University of Southern California, has a 10% acceptance rate. And you might say, oh, well, Mary Pat, that's a reach, that's a maybe, that's a, no. These are all extreme reach schools. Remember, UT Austin has that institutional priority with only at a maximum 10% of students can be from outside of the state of Texas. University of Michigan, yes, it has an 18% acceptance rate, but only about 40% of the students are accepted from outside of the state of Michigan. Urbana accepts, and a lot of these colleges do accept directly into the major. So Urbana's acceptance rate for computer science is about 5%. So for all these different reasons, they are all extreme reaches. And also, there are more than 26,000 high schools in the United States. And we are in a wonderful school district. We have wonderful high schools. We're very blessed. But the reality is there's a lot of wonderful students out there. And colleges can't just take the wonderful students from like Washington School District. And so again, give yourself some perspective. Sometimes kids are thinking that they're pretty amazing, and they are. I'm not saying that they're not, but I guarantee when you pull these students from other high schools, there's a lot of amazing students. So just keeping things in perspective. And so when you ultimately have a college list, these are how they can look. Again, they're color coded. There's a nice little pyramid. There's a hexagon that is. Some kids, I worked with a student just this week. I created a college list, and based on what the student was looking for, they were all green schools. And that's not a bad thing. She's based on what she's looking for, it's a good list. And then some students have it more like that. All I recommend, strongly recommend, is that you have a balanced list. Okay. This is what you do not want, because this will likely end up with a very unhappy situation senior year. And it's sad. These kids have worked super hard, and then to not like any of their choices. And one of the things that I always tell students is you have to ask yourself, for these highly selective schools, what is it about you that's going to earn one of those spots? And it's not going to be your GPA, and it's not going to be your 99th percentile test scores, because everybody who's applying has those. So just keep that in mind. All right. So we might have a basic college list at this point, but you have to go deeper. So there's two sources. There's tons of sources. I just want you to know, tons of sources, but these are two sources that are readily available, and I find a lot of good information on, and it's College Data and College Board. And you can find all sorts of different information. So here's College Board. And for both of these, this is for the University of Washington, Seattle. So this is a breakdown. You can see the GPA range. And so you can see, 95% of admitted students to UW Seattle have a 3.5 or higher. So if a student has less than a 3.5 and their goal is to get to UW, we can talk and give you other options. I was thrilled last year. I had two students who were below a 3.5. They were in that 3.25 to 3.49, and they got into Seattle. I was thrilled and surprised. Under my head there, you can see a breakdown of race and ethnicity. A little breakdown there. And then that's also where you can see the percentage of out-of-state students. So I was slightly wrong. I guess it was 73% of admitted students were from Washington State. Then you can see a list of activities. Obviously, there's probably more than this, but like if a student says, "Oh, I really want to, I want to dance in college, or I want to be in concert band," you can see what they have to offer. And then this is from College Data. Again, some of the similar information, but up at the top left there, you can see one that UW is on the quarter system versus semesters. You can see average class sizes. You can see for fall admission, you can see male, female, all that kind of stuff. You can see the deadline, how much it costs to apply to UW. They're notified by March 15th. Students have till June 1st to accept. Sometimes students want to defer. They want to take what's known as a gap year, and you can see student cannot defer. Then there's information about the curriculum. There's general ed classes. Students are not required to own or lease a computer. Foreign language. I sometimes work with students I have some students who love foreign language, and then I have other students who never want to take a foreign language ever again. And you can see at UW, it's not required, whereas math and science are. And then it shows the most popular programs: social sciences, which would be like economics and psychology, computer science, information science, and biological life sciences. So there's lots of good information to start reading about. Now, you might have said to yourself, Mary Pat didn't mention college rankings. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I don't use them. I never have used them. I know some people do. Some parents really get into it, but I'll tell you why. So for one reason, as I said at the very beginning, we are all different, and what's right for one person is not right for another. I always think about like who's your best friend? Is it the most popular? Because that's what a ranking would do. And I'd say, no, my best friend is quirky and makes me laugh and is always there for me. Whereas maybe the most popular kid would be, I don't know, the cheerleader. And it's like, nah, that's not my type. The criteria is flawed. They're not transparent. Rankings do not reflect student experiences. They tend to, colleges, which it's usually like the Ivy Leagues and things like that, they have huge budgets. And so they always end up higher because of that. The reality is most students can't get into the Ivy Leagues, and they don't have much transparency. And quite frankly, career success is not tied to where you go to college. I don't believe that it is. So acceptance rate is an input, all right? And I believe that a college is defined by its output. Graduation rates, what do students do? Are they employed? Are they getting internships during school? So no one has ever said to me, Mary Pat, find me a bad college. I want to go to a bad college. Everybody wants to go to a good college. But how do you determine it? Okay. And so these are some of the things that I focus on. So first, again, I like data a lot. So the first is the 4-year graduation rate. Now the government requires colleges to report the 6-year, but the 4-year is easily readily available. And what I like to see is at least a 50% acceptance rate for 4 years. And you might think, well, that sounds kind of low. However, it's actually very strong because in the United States, 56% of freshmen graduate in 6 years. All right. And I have a lot of mom sayings because I'm a mom, and I always believe that birds of a feather flock together. And so when our kids were going off to college, I thought if most kids are graduating in 4 years, that means my kids are likely to graduate in 4 years. And when we talk about the cost of college, you're going to understand why it is so important for students to graduate within 4 years. So now there can be colleges that do not have strong 4-year colleges or 4-year graduation rates that I would still recommend to a student. And that is typically because it is what's known as a co-op school. A co-op school is a school that requires students to work in their field. It's typically 2 semesters. It can be, again, it depends on the college, but generally speaking, it's 2 semesters. Could be more, could be less. Um, and students can't go to school during that time because they're working full time, and they're being paid, and they're usually being paid quite nicely. But because of that, they can't graduate in 4 years. Now, you don't pay tuition when a co-op is going on. There might be a little fee or something, but you're not paying the tuition. And if a student does a good job, oftentimes they're hired by the companies that they did their co-ops with. So that's a win-win. There can be other schools where the 4-year graduation rate isn't great. And if you ask admissions, and I want to stress, you can always ask these questions to admissions. Don't worry that you're going to offend them or they're not going to admit you because you ask these questions. That is not true at all. Ask away. Parents, students, feel free to ask. But sometimes it can be an overcrowded state school that maybe it's harder to get the classes needed to graduate. And it doesn't mean it'll take you 6 years, but it might be 4 years and a quarter or 4 years and 2 quarters. So just, again, do your research. The retention rate. What's the retention rate? The retention rate is the percentage of freshmen who come back for their sophomore year. And why is this important? Well, because colleges that do a good job of engaging their freshmen and making them feeling part of the campus and part of the community, those are students who are more likely to come back. In the United States, the average retention rate is about 70%. And so what I like to see is closer to high 80s, low, and 90% and above. Because again, those are just schools that have done a good job of connecting students, because it's a really, really difficult transition to go off to college. It is not an easy transition. Do they offer the specific programs that a student is looking for? If you think you might want to be an engineer and they don't offer engineering, well, that's not a good fit. If you think you might want to study business, or you think you might want to study, trying to think of something that might be more, become a registered nurse or computational biology or whatever, and they don't offer these things, again, doesn't mean it's not possible to create a program for yourself. Um, Another thing to ask is if I change my mind, is it easy to transfer? Because I'll tell you, some of these college majors, especially more the STEM field, if you're not admitted as a freshman, your odds of getting in, like transferring into them later on, is very, very low. So find out those questions. Does the cost work? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the cost of college. Cost is so important, and it should be one of the very first things families talk about when you start talking about creating a college list. Because in the US, parents are expected to pay for college. That's just the reality, and it is not cheap. And you don't want to wait till this time senior year when your child's all hot and bothered and has fallen in love and this is their one true thing. if there's, and there almost always is a budget. It's pretty rare that there isn't a budget of some sort. So make sure you're realistic, and that can help whittle. Okay, well, that's a school. It's out of our range. They don't give scholarship money. You know what? We're going to take that off the list. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And then does the culture of the college, does it fit you? Okay, not you, mom and dad, because you're not the ones going, but does it fit the student? Colleges are like people, they have personalities. We don't like everybody. And you just want to find the place where, a student will find their people, will be supported, will be successful. I say this all the time. Is not the college that a student goes. What does the student do where they go? That is the power of the college experience. Another thing that, again, as you're narrowing down a list, this is something I talk about more when I'm talking about college essays, but take the time and highlight or write down a school's mission and their values. And and I'll just give you an example. So if if a college says that a they like a a student with a global perspective. Okay, if you're a junior or a sophomore, you can be like, oh, I really like this school. I don't know that I have that. And you can maybe figure out things that you can do um, to get more of a global perspective. Maybe join Model UN. Or if a college says, well, we really, um, social justice is really important to us. And as a student, what does social justice mean? They go, I see. Oh, these are things I actually care about. Well, I should get involved and do some things. And then when they're writing their college essays, they can talk in such a way that the students' values match up with the college's values, and that can make for a better fit. So, anyways, so all this data that I've been talking about, the reason why it's important is only 41% of college freshmen graduate in 4 years. That graduation rate is important to me. And 1 in 3 freshmen don't return to college for their sophomore year. Okay, so that's that retention rate that we talked about. And again, here's more data for you, but I just ask families, please don't get hung up on that acceptance rate. So um, here's just some schools I picked. So you've got New York University, has a wonderful 4-year graduation rate of 78%, has a 12% acceptance rate. Again, so what does that make it? It makes it a reach, okay, for everybody. Then we have Santa Clara University, which is in Silicon Valley, has a great business school, has a great engineering program, has a great computer science program, and other things. Has a 85% 4-year graduation rate and a 52% acceptance rate. Um, Again, you can see University of Michigan, Stanford, and then we have Gonzaga. Okay, 80% graduation rate, 69% acceptance rate. And a school like Gonzaga is going to give very strong merit scholarships to students because they understand that they're competing against schools like UW and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's UW, 71%. Again, it's a great 4-year graduation rate with a 47% acceptance rate. So, anyways, don't don't get hung up. Now you might say, hey, Mary Pat, Purdue only has a 62% 4-year graduation rate. They're one of those schools that has a co-op. Okay, a lot of their engineering and computer science students have to do co-ops. So then another thing to pay attention to is, so there's this group of universities called the Association of American Universities. And these are the top leading research universities. There's 71 of them, okay? And they transform lives through education, research, and innovation. So outstanding. And this is a list of all the schools. And obviously you can see a lot of the highly selective schools on there, but you can see things like, oh, Arizona State, University of Pittsburgh, let me see here, Penn State, University of Washington, Indiana University, University of Arizona, Iowa, University of Iowa, University of Minnesota. There's more on here. University of Oregon, Purdue, and these are schools that strong students have a better chance of being accepted to, and they're part of this very small elite group of universities. So check out that too. Another thing to look at is honors programs. So some colleges have honors programs. Some schools have honors colleges. So a program is within a smaller college. So my daughter, as I said, she attended a small Jesuit liberal arts college, and she was in the honors program, had wonderful opportunities. that were available to her. One being the fact that she could never be told that a class was full. That is a wonderful golden ticket in some of these programs. Then there can be honors colleges, which are a college within a larger college. So a great example of that is Barrett Honors College, which is part of Arizona State. Wonderful program. Um, Arizona State is just a great school, generous with scholarship money, and Barrett is about a 9,000 person school within this. I think it's 40,000 at Arizona State. I don't know. But anyways, keep an open mind there. The pros, you can have smaller classes, you might have priority registration, the dorms might be better advising, research funding. The cons are you have to maintain a higher GPA, which is harder in college. The classes might be more demanding and things like that. These programs typically require an additional application, and they can be very selective. Like University of Oregon's honors program, I think has like a 5% acceptance rate. UW's is like 5% also. So just know that those are available. And there are some great resources that I love. These are books. Who Gets In and Why, a year inside of college admissions. And if you ever want to better understand how the University of Washington does their crazy admissions process, that's a great book to listen to. Um, and then Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be by Frank Bruni, who's a New York Times editor. It's a great book. I like listening to these kind of stories because they can be a little dense, but maybe as a family you listen to them. And then a great podcast. I know I always sound weird because I get very excited and love listening to these as I walk my dogs. But there's a podcast called The College Admissions Process, and what happens for each episode is the host, who's a high school principal, he interviews admissions officers. And so if you go onto the website, there's probably 250, and it's alphabetical by university. And there's a lot of the big names, there's some of the smaller schools. I would probably tell you if it were me, because you can't listen to everything, maybe you'd say, oh, okay, well, this was a school I wasn't considering because it's not in the top, not less than 10% acceptance rate. But Mary Pat mentioned it, and well, some of it looks good. Maybe listen to it, and you might go, "Oh my God, this is phenomenal." So, anyways, I do highly recommend that podcast. So now to talk about the cost of college, because that is an important part of finding and creating a college list is the financial fit. So 0.1% of colleges or of students in the US receive a full ride. That means everything is paid for. Okay, tuition, room and board, all that stuff. 1.5% of US students receive a full tuition scholarship. Okay. 7% of high school athletes play a varsity sport in college. 2% will play Division I, and 2% will receive athletic scholarships. So that leaves a lot of people not being covered by scholarships. So as I said earlier, the US system was designed that parents are expected to pay for college. Now, any students listening here, this does not mean you can say, hey, that lady said you have to pay for my college. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though is the government does not subsidize the cost of college. Now, if you happen to be a dual citizen to Canada, you should listen to some of the former webinars I've done about Canadian colleges. I've brought in speakers, and because the cost of college for citizens in Canada, it is subsidized by the government. So it's a great deal. So parents need to think about their willingness to pay, not just their ability to pay. And there's two types of aid. There's need-based aid and there's merit aid. And we'll talk more about them. So this is this shows the annual cost of college for 2024 and 25. And you can see UW, Western, Gonzaga. Now for Gonzaga, I say that it's generous with merit aid. So a student with strong academics, they might expect to get $30,000, $25,000 a year for 4 years, which can make it a lot more reasonable. You can see UCLA. Colorado State is a WUI school, which I haven't talked about yet. That's the WUI price. You got Stanford. And then I showed the cost of Lake Washington Technical, which is which would be similar to like Bellevue College or Cascadia. And that's why for a lot of students starting off at like at a community college or technical college and then transferring in can save a lot of money. But these numbers, this is why that graduation rate is so expensive. An extra year or two just really adds up. So I mentioned WUI. WUI stands for the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And all you have to do is type in WUI in your search box and you'll get linked to the page. But what it is there's 14 states. Washington is one of them. And I mentioned earlier that out of state, for public universities, out of state tuition is generally speaking is 3 times in-state tuition. So for WUI schools, it's 1.5 times in-state tuition. So it's a huge cost savings. Unfortunately, it is not every public university in the 14 states, but if you go to the WUI website, you can see which ones are. Sometimes they're selective, like Oregon State is a WUI school, but it's fairly selective with GPA, so kids have to do pretty well. So there's different types of money in the college world. There are the ones that have to be paid back, which is loans, which colleges put them in all shapes and sizes. Be careful about those. And then there's the ones that aren't paid back, which is what I like. So grants, scholarships, merit scholarships, and work study. Those are the ones that are not paid back. And there's a lot going on in our government right now, so I don't know that I don't know that this is going to be an accurate slide. But right now, there is what's known as the FAFSA. Okay, it's the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And this is something that is typically filled out senior year that students use to qualify for need-based aid, sometimes for merit aid, but it's not usually for merit aid. It's a free form and it's easy to fill out, and there's lots of videos and all that. Like I said, I don't know what's going on, so I don't want to talk too much about that. But let's talk about merit scholarships, because I like merit scholarships. So by definition, a merit scholarship is a tuition discount to attract a student to come to a school. And it's usually based on a student's grade. So this is where doing well makes a difference. Sometimes test scores, again, not as much, at least in the West, although I've seen students admitted to colleges where they didn't submit test scores and they got merit aid, and the school has said, if you have test scores, you might get more money. So it's possible. You don't apply for merit aid. It is just offered typically with admission, sometimes a little after, but it's typically with admission. And they'll say, congratulations, Mary Pat, you've been admitted and we'd like to offer you $20,000 a year for the next 4 years, or 25, whatever the dollar amount is. You don't repay these. And you do want to make sure that they're for 4 years of college. Like Western Washington gives merit aid, but it's usually only for the first year. So, and how do you determine if a college offers merit aid? So if you go to a college's website, you always have a search box. You can type in merit scholarships. And if it's an out-of-state public, remember, out-of-state public, make sure you type in non-resident. There are some that are very generous. And then there are some that say, sorry, all of our scholarship money is for our residents. Every college has to have a net price calculator on their website. So you can fill that out and they'll give you an idea. And if you can't figure it out, ask admissions. You can say, hey, this is the profile of my child. Can you give me a sense if they would qualify for any merit scholarship? It's a good question to ask. Don't be embarrassed. Thoughts about college majors. I'm going to speed this up because we're already at 8 o'clock, but earlier in January, I did a webinar on exploring majors and careers. And the reality is a lot of colleges are starting to admit students by major. There are still some that don't, but a lot of them are. So just know that. The undeclared and undecided, again, there are certainly colleges that welcome undecided and undeclared students, but then there are some that don't. Like the University of Washington doesn't offer that as an option any longer. They used to, but it's not an option on their application. So if a student is undeclared, undecided, one of the things I would ask a college as I was doing my research would be to find out how will the student be supported to make so that they make that decision. Because again, remember, your goal is to graduate in 4 years, hopefully. Can you change a major? You can ask that question. Can you design your own major? I had a student a couple years ago that I worked with, was very happy at her school. Um, but halfway through freshman year, she and her mom reached out to me and they're talking about transferring. And I said, "Oh, you're transferring?" And she said, "Yeah, because I've changed my major. I thought I wanted to study this, and now I want to study that." And I said, "Well, okay, well, you could certainly transfer, but did you talk to your college?" And they said, "Well, no." And I said, "You should go talk to find out." And so she did, and she was thrilled because she loved everything about her school, everything. It just they didn't have this major that she wanted, and they were able to create a program specifically for her, so she'll meet what she does. So again, that's not unheard of. That can be very common. But just do your own research. Real briefly, just want to talk about some of the more popular majors like computer science. So you can see, as I said, super hard for a lot of these schools. Carnegie Mellon has a 5%, Berkeley has a 1.9%, Urbana 7.5, UT Austin 6%, UW Seattle for residents 25%, which wow, looks very good, doesn't it? But there's other strong computer science programs: Colorado State, Oregon State, Seattle U, University of Arizona, Washington State University. Again, that's an in-state school. And then sometimes people get very rigid and fixed on just computer science, but there's all these other majors that involve computer science that students might want to think about. So again, keep an open mind. And then the same thing with engineering. You can see them like Georgia Tech, 18%, Urbana, 33%, Michigan, less than 20%, Purdue, 37%. Again, UW is for for is about a 50% acceptance rate for engineering. So that's great. But then there's all these other schools that also have strong programs. And again, it doesn't mean you can't apply to these schools, but maybe you want to add a few of these other ones so that you have choices. I just want students to have choices like Arizona State, Gonzaga, Oregon State, Seattle U, Washington State, kind of a similar profile to the computer science. And what about pre-professional majors? Oops. What is a pre-professional major? This is for the student who says, "I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to go to become a dentist. I want to become a pharmacist. I want to become a physical therapist." Um, these are students who have plans for graduate school. And so, like medical school is very popular. A lot of students to think about that. And just, I always tell them there is no major called pre-med, okay? Oftentimes people major in the sciences because of the MCAT that they have to take, but you don't have to. And one of the things you want to find out is how will a school support you on your path to this? I would probably ask what percentage of students actually pass the MCAT and then get into medical school. I would probably find out what medical schools the students from that school were being admitted to. That will give you some good information. And how do you explore careers? Um, well, I don't, I'm gonna, I guess I should have taken the slide out, but what interests you? What are you curious about? Interviewing people whose careers interest a student. Adults are very happy to talk to teens. Job shadow. The WANET classes that we have here are amazing internships. But again, it's important because unless you do some exploration, you won't know if it's the right path for you or not. And also, college essay questions are usually, why do you want this major? I'm a huge fan of visiting colleges. One of the resources that you'll get are my tips on how to visit colleges. I know you can't visit every college that's on your list. My advice would be to do a variety. Sometimes parents say, "Oh, let's go to all the most selective." And again, if you want to do one or two, but maybe do a green school, maybe do a blue school, maybe, like do a variety, do a small, do a liberal arts, do a public university. And again, just expose and figure things out. There's nothing wrong with visiting in the summer. School year is probably best because you can see students, but you can get a lot of information. Why do I believe in visiting colleges? It can demystify for students what it means to go to a college. It can motivate a student, man, especially if you're a sophomore or something or early junior year, and you're finding out what grades are required or what classes they want students to take or test, whatever. It can really motivate a student to hear it from somebody else. Some colleges care about demonstrated interest, and it's a good way to show it. It can help a student figure out what's the right fit for them. I can't tell you the number of times students have said, "Oh my God, I thought this was my school." And the minute I walked on that campus, I knew it wasn't. Or the reverse, like, "Oh my God, my parents dragged me there. And then once I stepped foot, it was the right place for me." So I would never, ever agree to go to a college, like say, yes, I'm coming here without stepping foot on that campus. It is too big of a decision. And it can also create discussion points between students and parents to visit schools. But there's other ways. I know it can be expensive to visit colleges in person. You can go to the college website. There's virtual tours and webinars. There's college fairs. A lot of times the colleges come to our high schools in the fall and students can sign up to attend those sessions. There's student forums like Reddit and College Confidential. You can do summer programs and pre-college programs on campus. Like you might not know, but high school students can take summer classes at UW. Talking to current students and alumni and take notes through all this different stuff that you do, take notes because it will come in handy. And never be nervous about reaching out to admissions. Sometimes people go, "What do you mean? I can't call admissions. They're gonna keep track and they're gonna," well, they might keep track, but they're not keeping track of your question. And that's what they're there for. They love to answer questions. So do not, you can email them, you can call them. Another question, and we're just about done here before I do my little sample, is I always ask students, how much rejection can you handle? And I give them a story problem where I say, okay, let's pretend you've got 10 schools. That does not mean anyone has to apply to 10 schools. It's for my story problem. And I tell kids, you're going to feel differently about these 10 schools, but every school on your list you should want to go to. You should not be applying to schools that you, in your heart of hearts, do not want to. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Don't do it. So you've got these 10 schools and you'll feel differently. There's going to be some that you're like, oh, gosh, I hope I get into these schools. This is my dream school. And then others where you go, you know what? I'd get an excellent education. I liked it, but again, you don't feel the same about all of them. And you think about how many no's do I get before my stomach hurts and I kind of feel like a loser. And everybody's different. I've done a lot of work on myself and I know that 3 is my limit. Once I got to 4, I would feel bad. Sometimes students tell me 1, sometimes they tell me 7, sometimes they tell me 9. I don't wish that 9 on anybody, especially if you're a hardworking student. You should have lots of good choices. So think about that. And then when you finalize a college list, as I said, there's no magic number. Is it balanced? If it's all orange and red, that is not a balanced. But if you've got, 1 or 2 greens, 1 or 2 blues, and if you want to have the rest, that's fine. As long as you would go to those green and blue schools and you're excited about them. Reach out to the departments to find out more. See if there's a FIS guide report. That'll be one of the resources that I send how to get it, but it's just available on Amazon for less than $20. It's a great guide. Look at the data, talk to students. Does the college fit into your family budget? What programs are offered? Does the culture, the campus culture, is it you? Are these your people? And keep in mind, there is no perfect school. Okay, no perfect school. Perfection does not exist anywhere. And ideally, I always tell students you should have your list finalized by early September. And the reason I say that is because those deadlines, as I said, most colleges are due in November of senior year. So, all right. So I'm going to break out of this and then go to questions, but I always want families to understand that I am a resource in the community, and that is something I'm very proud of and I take very seriously. So don't hesitate. Like if you're hearing everybody chit chat and you're like, Mary Pat didn't say that, or is that true, or whatever, email me, findyourfit@lwsf.org. I'm happy to answer questions. I'll always answer questions within 24 hours of receiving them. Follow Find Your Fit or the Lake Washington Schools Foundation on social media. You can learn about other events that we're doing. And okay, I'm going to do a real quick, very quick college search here. And as I said, I'm going to make this look super easy, and I apologize because I know it's going to take people more than that. So, okay. All right. So as I said, I like College Board. I'm going to use College Board. And then after this will just take a minute or two. I'm happy to take any questions that people have. Anyway, so this is College Board, and you go here to College Search. Okay. And there's all these filters that I talked about. So let's do a major. I'm going to do engineering. Now look what happens. You go engineering, and there's all these different types of engineering. So let's say I want mechanical engineering. Oops, that was materials. Mechanical engineering. There we go. Okay, so show colleges. Oh, look, 443. Okay, location. Again, I'm going to keep this small. Let's say California, Oregon, and Washington. And you can see all the different states are there. Okay, show colleges. Okay, now we're down to 52. Okay, that's good. Type. All right. I am looking for a 4-year degree. So I want a 4-year bachelor's. And then they ask for type, public and private. Uh, that's what I would pick. Sometimes they have for-profit colleges, and personally, I'm not a fan of those. So campus life. I want to go to a bigger school. I want at least a medium or large. And let's say I want an urban or suburban setting. Okay. All right. And let's see. Let's look at admissions. And I'm a strong student. Um, I've got all A's. I've got a lot of AP classes. I got a strong ACT score. So I'm going to go 10 to 25% and 25 to 50%. And then click there. What are we down to? Okay, now to 9. Okay, that'll make the list pretty. Okay, so you can see here's UW. All right, so you can see it says 4-year public, very large urban campus. You can see the okay, so this graduation rate that you see here is the 6-year graduation rate. So 84% is good. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Then you have UC Davis. So this is an out-of-state public. Now, again, I know these schools. I know that the University of California system, very expensive. It's probably, I don't know, $68,000 a year with tuition and room and board. The UCs do not give scholarship money. And I can say, that's a little too high for my family. San Diego State, 78% graduation rate for 6 years. Again, it's very large. Now, again, I know this, you'd have to dig into this, but I know San Diego State is a Cal State school, and it is a lot less expensive. It's probably about $40,000 a year for tuition and room and board. And I'm going to say that falls into my family budget, so I might keep that one on there. Cal State, okay. Personally, I'm not a fan of a lot of the Cal State schools because of their 4-year graduation rates. Well, this isn't too bad at 73% with 6 years, but again, maybe. And then Irvine, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, again, great school. More in line with San Diego State, another UC, and then Berkeley. So there aren't that many. The one thing I want to show you, though, is if I go back to the admissions and I say, you know what, I thought I'd get more schools. I didn't realize that there's so few mechanical engineering schools in these 3 states. So if I take out very selective and then I go here to less selective and show some schools, 6 more are found. Okay, another Cal State, Oregon State, which is a great, great school. So anyways, that's how I would do that. And I would start taking them and putting them on my spreadsheet and then doing more work. And then I might say, oh, well, maybe I should look at schools in Arizona. Maybe I should look at schools in Colorado. You know, like maybe broadening it out if I'm not seeing exactly what I like. So anyways, I hope that was helpful to you. As I said, I know I do this all the time and be like someone being a really good chef and they could whip something up very fast where I'd be poring over the recipe and having to reread it 5 times. So All right, so